toxic masculinity.
Home of defense witness in Chauvin trial gets vandalized with a pig's head.
Yes, vandalized with a pig's head. This is a fantastic story. I mean, fantastic in that it's provocative. Like in terms of like a news story, it doesn't get better than this. Nobody was hurt, right? But it does show. I think it very nicely illustrates how effed up leftists are, and how unfair this trial is, and how people seem to feel like it's totally acceptable to do something like this, when people have just made up their mind that this guy's guilty, right? They think that Chauvin is guilty and that anybody who defends him is just pure evil, and God, these people are awful. All right, let's see here. So this is what the front door of this guy's house looks like. Now, this is not where he lives, actually. So this is, what's this guy's name? Vandals leave severed pig's head at former home of defense witness in Chauvin trial. Barry Broad is his name. He's a former police officer. And Barry Broad was brought in basically to talk about whether or not the amount of force that Chauvin was using on George Floyd was warranted.
Mm-hmm.
And he said some things that people didn't like. And so people went to a house that he thought was his, and they sprayed blood all over it. And then they put a severed pig's head, I guess, on his doorstep or something like that. But anyway, But anyway, it's not his house. He had moved out of that house years earlier. Somebody else lived there. So some random person just had all their house just kind of vandalized by some thugs. Let's read here. Police officers over the weekend found a severed pig's head and blood splashed on and around a doorway of a home in California, formerly occupied by an expert who testified for the defense in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. On April 17th, a group of vandals dumped the pig's head in front of and splattered blood on the house in West Santa Rosa, the city's police department said. Photographs disseminated by authorities showed blood smeared across the home's garage doors and splattered on and around the front door. Officers arrived to find the front of the victim's house smeared with what appeared to be animal blood and a decapitated pig's head near the front porch. The Santa Rosa Police Department said in a statement. The home was once the residence of Barry Broad, I don't know how to pronounce that, a retired police officer who was called by the defense in Chauvin's trial in the death of George Floyd. Broad hasn't lived in the home for years, police said. He no longer resides in California. The cost to clean up the vandalism exceeded $400, making it a felony. The group fled after the current resident called the police around 3 a.m. About 45 minutes later, a large hand statue in front of the Santa Rosa Plaza Mall was vandalized with a similar substance suspected to be animal blood. The suspects also left a sign in front of the statue. The sign had a picture of a pig and the words "oink oink." Obviously, people who don't like police. Witness descriptions of the group that vandalized the statue were similar to descriptions of the group that vandalized the residence. Well, why don't you tell us what that description is? I don't understand. All right. Broad could not be reached for comment. Broad told the court in Minneapolis last week that the force that Chauvin used on Floyd, who was on the ground after resisting arrest for allegedly using a counterfeit bill, was justified. And you know what? Let's go ahead and watch that video, actually, because I have it here. It was actually a pretty mild-mannered guy, and just presenting his perspective. This is pretty quiet, so you may have to turn the volume up.
Just briefly overview your opinions in this particular case.
I felt that Derek Chauvin was justified and was acting with objective reasonableness, following Minneapolis Police Department policy and current standards of law enforcement in his interactions with Mr. Floyd.
In your opinion, was this a use of deadly force?
It was not.
And in your view of that use of force, what is your perspective on that?
That Mr. Floyd's level of resistance was objectively reasonable for those officers to do the techniques that they were doing. I felt that level of resistance exhibited by Mr. Floyd justified the officers and higher levels use of force that they chose not to select.
In a situation where we have here, where you're actually physically on top of someone, in a position which, based on your training and based on your experience and based on your knowledge, could cause positional asphyxia, that's a different context, correct?
Yes?
And in that context, a reasonable police officer would at least acknowledge and consider the possibility that what they're doing is causing a problem, wouldn't they?
Where you would interpret what Mr. Floyd is doing while he's making the statements, and it appeared to me with that video that he was still struggling.
Struggling or writhing?
I don't know the difference.
Well, would a reasonable police officer on the scene consider whether somebody is actively resisting or writhing on the ground because they can't breathe?
I think it'd be reasonable for the officer to take what Mr. Floyd had been doing prior to that and still consider that he was struggling.
Mics are on. Okay, so
Okay, I'll stop swearing.
what that guy said was I think spot on. I've often thought that whilst watching the full video, the full police body cam footage, George Floyd had been resisting basically from the moment the officer approached the car. He was screaming, almost crying, saying like, "Don't kill me, don't kill me." The officer didn't have his gun out. The officer wasn't threatening him in any way. He was saying, don't kill me," almost as a kind of suggestion that, because in the popular media, there's this idea that police will kill black suspects, that he could sort of pretend to be a victim in this case. And so I think that the police officers from that very moment weren't really taking the things that he said seriously. He appeared to be a little bit messed up, either on drugs or something, or maybe he was a little crazy. But in either case, you couldn't really take what he was saying at face value. He would say things like, I'm claustrophobic, I can't ride in the back seat, I need somebody with me. He was saying all kinds of weird stuff. He said, I can't breathe a number of times before police officers ever touched him.
Yeah.
He jumped into the car and then jumped out of the car, in the other side. He slithered from one side to the other to kind of evade the police.
Yeah.
He's obviously trying to get out of things. He was saying, can I sit in the front seat? There's a lot of weird stuff that was going on there. So, it's what we would refer to in America as the boy who cried wolf. He had said a lot of things that seemed that he was lying, or that he was just saying things to try to get out of arrest. And so the police were, I think, under the impression that everything that he was doing was a lie, and everything that he was doing was just a means to desperately escape arrest. And so even if you are detaining him after he's been struggling for so long to get away and trying to slip out of custody, if he's struggling there on the ground, or if he's playing, if he's not struggling, you think, okay, well, maybe he's still trying to get out of it, or maybe he is playing dead or pretending to be subdued when he isn't. And so I think that these cops, and this, what this guy said was, I think, really profound. He said, I think that they had every right to use more force than they did, and they actually restrained themselves, and they used less force than they had to. A lot of people point to the knee on the neck as a particularly vicious restraining method that was probably used, probably contributed to his death. To me, that's really unclear. Did the restraining method cause, in any way contribute to his death? I don't think so. I think had they just had him in cuffs in the back seat, I think that he would have died. That's my thought. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't think anybody knows. Yeah, so did I wake you up? Sorry, buddy. I don't think anybody knows one way or the other. But at the end of the day, that's really a guess, because we know that the primary cause of death was the drug overdose. And so the whole trial to me is a sham. The whole trial to me is is ridiculous. But people so desperately want to believe that this guy intentionally murdered George Floyd, despite the fact that all these other cops were just standing around thinking that what he was doing was perfectly normal. And also, if you consider that the Minneapolis police officers are trained to restrain suspects in that way, using the knee to the neck method, and a lot of police officers around the country are trained to do that. If you want to blame anybody to say that the knee on the neck contributed to the death, you have to blame literally like every cop in the country who determined that for their department that is a reasonable way to restrain people. I mean, it's something that's used all over the world to restrain people. And is everybody now guilty of attempted murder anytime they've ever restrained anybody that way? I don't think so. I mean, I've never heard of anybody else being killed because of that particular restraint. I mean, if I were the attorney in charge of the defense, even though I'm not an attorney, I would have played video and posted photos and talked about the statistics of how many times officers around the world have used that restraining technique and how many people have died specifically because of the restraining technique. My guess is that it's something like 0.
You never know.
I'm sure I mean, look, at the end of the day, there might be a couple, but there was probably always some other kinds of circumstances around the death. It probably wasn't just that restraint, because I'm pretty sure that that's a restraint that's used specifically because it's effective and it's not deadly. All right, so anyway, we can see the viciousness of the left here, splattering blood on somebody's door, putting a dead pig's head. This is another reason why it's possible that if Derek Chauvin is convicted, which I don't think he will be, I mean, people are saying that they think that this is all fixed and that he will be convicted because it's fixed. I'm not so sure. I think that this judge is pretty decent. I don't know about the jury. The jury's a tough call, but to me, it's so obvious that the guy's innocent that I don't see how he could possibly be convicted. But if he is, by some scheming method, I think that you're going to have to call it a mistrial because of what was done here, trying to intimidate witnesses, because of Maxine Waters going around saying if he's not convicted, you have to go out and riot in the streets. I mean, basically threatening Minneapolis, threatening everybody involved in various ways. I mean, this is a mistrial. Mm-hmm. Easy. That's my guess. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but that would be my guess. Anyway, do you want me to turn up the brightness on your camera?
I can, yeah. I can read the next story.
Yeah, and the final story, I believe, for today.
Yeah. Facebook is shutting down smaller apps.
You gotta throw in a little bit of chit chat there while I'm brightening you up.
I'm Russian. I don't know how to chit chat.
All right, so yeah, a little bit of graphic imagery of a Facebook emoji hand flipping people off. So just beware. I'm gonna switch to that. Oh, there we go. Not for the faint of heart, ladies and gentlemen. A bit crude. Anyway, this is a website called Android Police. This guy has written here about Facebook has been bullying third-party apps, Swipe and Simple Social. They're bullying them into oblivion. They're strong-arming these apps into shutting down. Toxic Masculinity, weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.